Hey everyone, in today's video, I'm going to be going over what I believe is the best bow build you can use. Now, the reason I think it's the best out there is mainly because I've been able to throw out tons of damage at every boss in the game, regardless of how tanky, small, or mobile they are. I've basically been an unstoppable force that goes through everything. But anyways, let's actually dive into the build now, and we'll start it off with the best bows to use. So in our offhand, we're going to be using the Lion GREATBOW for two reasons. Surprisingly, we're not going to be using this bow normally, but rather for its Ash of War and passive buff that are both extremely good. So the Ash of War on this thing is RADAHN'S Rain, which is the exact same thing as Rain of Arrows. Shoot one arrow into the sky and rain down 20 of them, obliterating large targets. Except this is a GREATBOW, so it's going to do a lot more damage than if Rain of Arrows was placed on a regular bow or a short bow. Yes, there is another GREATBOW that can use this Ash of War, yet the Lion GREATBOW complements our setup much better. In addition, the Ash of War itself and Rain of Arrows have always had one major issue. It works phenomenal on larger sized enemies, but when it came down to targets that were relatively small, well, just a bit bigger than your character, let's say, most of the arrows would miss and you'd lose out on so much damage. Normally this would be a huge issue, but with the way I have this build set up, no matter how big or small your opponent is, you're going to be able to rain down tons of damage regardless. Now the way we achieve this is with the type of arrows we use, them being the GOLEM'S great arrows. These absolute missiles are insanely good all around, and there's a good explanation for why I'm calling them missiles. Whenever you shoot one of these great arrows, the first thing it comes into contact with causes them to explode. So if we combine this with the Ash of War RADAHN'S Rain, we're basically just calling down an airstrike that obliterates anyone in front of us. Lastly for this is we can throw on the Ritual Sword Talisman that gives us an extra 10% damage increase while at full health. This talisman just makes a lot of sense for this setup cause it's a bow build. We're going to be staying far away from our targets, avoiding any incoming damage. Now if we were to find these items, you can get the Lion Bow after defeating the boss Radahn and turning in his ashes to Enna, who can be found at the round table. With the Golem's great arrows, these you'll actually have to farm them off the Archer Golem that is just outside of the Divine Tower in Limgrave. Since you have to farm these, which we all aren't really a fan of, I'd recommend saving these for tougher bosses in the game, kinda like a special attack. Then for the Ritual Sword Talisman, this can be rewarded after defeating a demi-human queen who can be found in the Lux Ruins. So we're all good on dealing with bosses, but because those arrows are a bit difficult to get a lot of, I did add a second bow to this build that we're actually going to be using normally this time, the Golem GREATBOW. It's one of the best bows to use, having a C rating in strength, which is amazing, cause all of the bows in the game usually have a D rating or nothing at all. Therefore, we can increase its damage output by putting majority of our points into strength, making it a strength focused build. Besides this, we have another way of making this bow hit a lot harder. Now if you remember with the Lion GREATBOW, I said it has a really good passive buff to it, that being a 20% damage increase when firing Radahn'S spears. So what's fantastic about this is when we have the Lion Bow in our offhand, we can still get that 20% damage increase while firing the arrows from the Golem Bow, which has a higher attack power rating. On top of that, the arrows, or spears, that give us a 20% damage increase are infinitely buyable. Thus, there's no farming or complicated way of getting them. Just have some runes to buy them, and that's about it. At the end of the day, it's phenomenal for dealing with strong opponents and even the toughest bosses in the game with how much damage you do per shot. Now, if we were to get all of these items, the Golem's GREATBOW can be looted from the exact same Golem Archer that you would farm to get the arrows from. It's a really nice coincidence having two items to look for from the same enemy. With Radahn's spears, the exact same thing. After killing the boss Radahn, you'll be able to buy them from Enna at the round table, just like how we would buy the Lion's GREATBOW. All of these items are easily accessible from the early to mid game, and they'll have no issues at all taking on the end game either. Before I continue on, I forgot to mention about the Golem's GREATBOW Ash of War. Sadly, it can't be changed, but with there not being many Ashes of War for the GREATBOWs, it's not that bad. Through and through. Pretty much the Mighty Shot Ash of War for GREATBOWs. You enter into a stance and fire a powerful arrow that does extra damage, can go through multiple targets, and can be fired faster than normally shooting it. The only downside to it is when you are shooting them rapidly back to back with the Ash of War in effect, is you can't regen any of your stamina while holding it. It's really not that bad at all on the account of it doing more damage and firing faster. It's more something just to be mindful of, cause there has been a few times where I ran out of stamina while doing so and I wasn't able to dodge the incoming attacks. Speaking of damage, we have another two talismans that most of you probably saw coming since they are the only two bow related talismans in the game, the Arrow's Sting and Arrow's Reach. Now the Arrow's Sting talisman increases all damage from arrows and bolts by an extra 10%. Very straightforward, no catch to it at all. With the Arrow's Reach, just as it sounds, it's going to decrease our damage fall off when shooting at a distance. Now this is really key because we want to keep as much range as possible from our targets, but also not lose any damage due to the far range. An added bonus to these is they're both early game items that are incredibly easy to get. For the Arrow Sting talisman, you can find it in a chest at the top of the tower next to the impassable Great Bridge resting place, literally on the way for when you go to fight Radahn to get the bow and arrows. With the Arrow's Reach talisman, this can be looted from a chest inside the tower above the storm gate. Just go around the hill, fight 2 easy guards, and it's all yours. So that covers almost everything for the bow related parts of this build, and I did throw on a sword as well cause I feel like you always need at least some kind of melee weapon for any build in general, regardless if it's magic or consumable focused. Hence, the sword we're using is the Iron Greatsword. Absolutely astonishing. It's the hardest hitting greatsword that scales with strength, which we have a lot of points in because of the Golem's Greatbow. Even if you don't put the heavy affinity on it to scale with strength, the damage difference is so minor, almost having nothing to do but level the sword up and you're good. Even the Ash of War that comes with it, Stamp, the upwards cut variation, is phenomenal against most enemies. I did change this out for something I found to be a bit better, well, harder hitting, Lion's Claw. You do a flip and slam your sword into the ground for tons of burst damage. I also have on the Shard of Alexander that increases the damage of all Ash of War attacks, including our bows as well, by an extra 15%. So this is going to benefit every weapon we have equipped. Overall, the Iron Greatsword is good against all enemies, but it does come with a catch though. The place you get this weapon from is very late into the game, having to farm it from a Misbegotten in either Leyndell Royal Capital that can be found in the ash-covered path leading towards the Forbidden Lands, or from another Misbegotten who can be found just north of the Haligtree Town Plaza Site of Grace. I know late game items are pretty annoying, but I do have a very good alternative to this, the Zweihander. It does a bit less damage than the Iron Greatsword, not by a crazy amount, and weighs a bit more as well, except it's 100 times easier to get just by simply buying it from the merchant who can be found in his shack at the very west of the Weeping Peninsula. Definitely your best secondary or even primary option hands down. Then for where to get the Ash of War Lion's Claw, which you would also use on the Zweihander, you can be rewarded it after defeating a Lion Guardian that can be found inside of Fort Gale. Lastly, for the Shard of Alexander, you'll have to finish the Iron Fist Alexander questline in order to be rewarded it. Doing so, I'd highly recommend finishing that questline for this talisman, mainly because it's something that's used in so many builds, you'll almost always be using it. Now that concludes all of the weapons and talismans for this setup, so let's move on to the Flask of Wondrous Physic. There aren't any particular tiers that really help out with our bows, besides the green spill crystal tier that'll increase our maximum stamina by 15% for 3 minutes, just so we can use the Ash of War through and through more times before we completely run out of stamina. The other one is the green burst crystal tier, that'll increase our stamina recovery speed by 33% for 3 minutes as well. Nothing spectacular, but these will benefit us the most compared to the other tiers by quite a bit. Now I'd recommend using this during boss fights or areas where you know you're going to be shooting a lot of arrows or just consuming tons of stamina. For where to find both of these items, the green spill crystal tier can be picked up next to an altar beside the minor Erdtree in Mistwood. Afterwards, you can grab the green burst crystal tier that is rewarded after defeating an Erdtree avatar boss who can be found in Caelid, east of the Smoldering Church. Before I go over the minimum stats required, let's take a better look at the armor we can use. Now personally, I really enjoyed the black knife set Not because it just looks really nice, which I think we can all agree on, but it also offers a fair amount of protection for how light it is and a nice passive that comes on the chest armor. When wearing the Black Knife armor unaltered, which is very important, it silences all of our walking, rolls, and jumps entirely. This is just going to make it far more easy to sneak by enemies, to avoid close range fights, and even set ourselves up in a good position to shoot some arrows. This isn't an absolute must-have, but it is pretty helpful. If you intend on using other armor, no worries, it's not going to ruin the build or anything at all. Nonetheless, if you do wish to use the Black Knife set, you'll have to reach Ordina, Liturgical Town in the concentrated snowfields, to where you'll find the full set on a corpse under an archway. Another late game item or armor set, yet again, it's not going to make or break the build at all. Coming to the end of the video, we can go over the minimum stats required. So to use everything in this build, you'll need at least 24 strength and 18 dex. That's it. Consequently, you won't have to change up whatever build you're currently using to even just try this setup out to see if it's something you would enjoy. There's basically no risk at all. In spite of that, if you do choose to copy my exact build, after reaching my current level and you decide to keep on leveling up, I'd recommend putting more points into Mind and Endurance. Therefore, you'll be able to use Ashes of War more often before running out of either stamina or mana. Now that's everything for today's video. I do want to give a big thanks to the members of my channel for supporting me on my videos and the future ones to come. Thanks for watching everyone, and I hope I see you all in the next one.